Hey everyone, as Mrs. Rowland said, I'm Nicholas Weber. I work as a software developer at Concordia Publishing House, which if you look under your seats, there's a hymnal. We publish that hymnal and a bunch of other curriculum that you guys probably use. For my undergraduate degree, when I went off to college, I studied organ performance. Though I don't work as an organist professionally anymore, I still keep up with it and I still really enjoy playing the instrument. So today I'm going to go ahead and we'll start with a piece so you can kind of get in your ear what it sounds like and what it is like. And then I want to tell you a little bit about how this amazing instrument works so you appreciate it a little more. Then we'll go ahead and hear a little more music. And I'll go ahead and take your questions also, really anytime you have them, except while I'm playing, of course. So without further ado, I want to play for you. This is Pachelbel's Toccata in E minor. And you might know Johann Pachelbel from his rather famous or infamous Canon in D. But this piece is not that piece. So here is Pachelbel's Toccata in E minor, and you're going to see that I'm going to be using my hands, but also you can watch my feet, and I'll talk more about that later. Sometimes called the king of instruments, for good reason. It has many pipes, and it is one of the most advanced machines that you will see in the entire world before you get to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is that time when factories started appearing and you were able to automate or at least make many mundane jobs like weaving fabric a lot easier. But before that time, this was one of the most advanced machines you could find in the entire world. And I want to tell you a little bit about how it works. But you're going to need to bear with me because I need to tell you about how it works in a couple different steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it works. And everything I'm telling you is going to be true, but it's not the whole story. So what I'm going to say to you is I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and then I'm going to say, but actually, it's a little more complicated than that. And then I'll tell you a little bit more. Sound good? All right. So, at the most basic level, if you push down a note on the organ, this is connected, this particular organ is called what's a tractor organ. So, a piece of metal or a wire or wood connects a valve from this key to the pipe. And when you play the note, that valve opens and you hear the sound. That's the most basic level. But actually, it's a little more complicated than that. Let me tell you about that. So notice that you might have seen me do this before I played that note. What happens if I push that back in? This is called a stop. What happens if I don't have any stops open at all? Nothing happens. So actually, in order to get the sound of the air, you might be able to hear the wind blowing in the organ. This is a wind instrument. Fans are blowing back there. There are bellows in order to push air into the pipes. But if no stops are pulled out, that air can't get into the pipes. So let's say that this is a box with a bunch of holes in it. And on these holes sit these pipes. And the way stops work is if the stop isn't pulled, this happens. No air gets through at all, and you get this. But if you pull out the stop, on traditional organs, what happens is there's a slider that then slides across, and now, what happens? We get sound. That air can get into the pipes, and you hear something. But, what am I going to say? It's a little more complicated than that. And that brings us to this. So, again, everything I'm telling you is true. This is what's happening. But it's more complicated because you don't have just one stop. You have lots of stops to choose from. So let's say that I have 3 stops that I want to use. So right now, and again, this isn't quite how it is because each one of these rows is independent of the other. You don't have to activate all 3 at once. But let's just say that we did. So right now we have nothing happening. And if I play middle C, let's say that this perforation, this hole right here is the middle C hole. And right now there's a bunch of air under that middle C as soon as I push that note down. But none of that air can get through because, as you know, there are no stops pulled out. But if I pull out 3 different stops, now all of a sudden it's like this, and you hear 3 different independent sounds. And again, it's not that all these have to go all at once, but that's how we did it. So that's the organ in a nutshell, very briefly. Now, I'll answer some of your questions about the organ in general and some of the things that you've seen so far, but I want to ask you what questions do you have about what we just talked about with the stops? Yes?
Okay, so all the little white things, what would happen if you pulled them all out?
That's a great question. What do you think would happen?
It would be like a whole bunch of different styles at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, this is also, you might have heard the popular expression, pulling out all the stops. The piece that I just played for you, the Pachelbel Toccata in E minor, it is a fairly loud piece. So you get a lot of sound there. But actually, the last piece I'll play for you, you'll actually get to hear what it sounds like when you pull out all the stops, when you put in all the effort, when you're doing everything. So basically, the more stops you pull out, the more sound you get. And you get different sounds also. Like some of these stops are principal stops, which are these ones that you usually hear in the facade. So you can hear that that's that pipe right there. You have flutes, which are a lighter sound, and you have reeds, which are really buzzy and kind of in your face. And so you can combine those different sounds. What other questions do you have? Yes?
On the bottom where you did the feet thing,
Yeah.
those black things in front of the toe?
Yeah. So down here we've got a whole nother keyboard. This is the pedal board. Something like that. You can play melodies on it. The last piece I'll play for you is very extensive on the pedals. You'll really want to watch my feet for that. But you were asking about what these black things are, right? Okay, so these are, so I have memory levels, which is one of the great things about modern organs, is you can just program in what stops you want and change them. And these black things down here do the exact same thing. And why do you want this? If I can do it up here, why would I want it down here? Yeah.
So instead of trying to move your hands, you can actually use.
Yeah. So, I'm playing around, like something really soft. And I don't even have to take my fingers off the keyboard. It's fun. Other questions? Yeah.
So I know that you said the finger one, like your fingers, they go up to the pipes and they make sounds, but like how does it work with foot pedals?
It's the same concept. So these foot pedals are also connected to wires or wooden dowels that link together, and they also open those channels underneath the pipes. And then if that stop is pulled out, then you get the sound. It's the same concept. Yeah.
So what makes the stops come out? Like when you press the buttons, what makes them just come out?
Yeah, so you can either pull them out manually, right? Or when you press the button, it depends on the organ. Different organs are different. But generally speaking, I believe with this one, I'm not as familiar with this particular organ, but generally there's like a motor behind here that'll push those stops out for me, basically, that can control both the pushing out and if I hit cancel, because if you're playing for church, and now it's time for the prayers, and you're kind of doing your thing, and then all of a sudden, like, you move, and all of a sudden, you play a note during the service that when you're not supposed to. That's not fun. So generally speaking, you want to always close the stops when you're done playing. Okay? All right, well, let me go ahead and play the next piece for you. You might have noticed that we've got different, as you already learned, we've got these different sounds from pulling out different stops, right? But I have different stops on the Haptwerk, this keyboard, than I do on the Swell, which is this keyboard. So, for this piece, it's called Nun Bitten Weir. It's on a chorale tune, on a hymn tune, basically. And it solos out the melody on its own, so you can hear it clearly. So let's go ahead and hear Nun Bitten Weir by Buxtehude. Buxtehude was a composer that lived in the mid-Baroque era. So this is in the 1600s. And the next piece we're going to hear after the hymn we'll sing is by J.S. Bach. And J.S. Bach is considered one of the greatest composers that ever lived. And Bach respected, when Bach was a young man, he respected Buxtehude so much, and his reputation as an organist was so good that he walked a long way, all the way from southern Germany to northern Germany to hear Buxtehude play and to learn from him. How many of you have been to Chicago? Yeah, great. It's about 4.5 hour drive. Now that's driving on the freeway. Imagine walking all the way to Chicago. That's a long way, isn't it? That's how far Bach walked to hear Buxtehude. Now we're going to go ahead and sing a hymn that's based on the next tune that we're going to do. So before you get out your hymnals, which you'll do in just a second, any questions about what we've gone over so far? Yes?
It's not really what you've gone over so far, but organs and pianos kind of are the same. Well, not really, but like, could you play an organ piece on a piano?
That's a good question. So pianos and organs are both very similar and very different. They're both keyboard instruments. You're looking at the same keyboard, or a little shorter, but basically the same keyboard that you'd see on the piano. Don't worry, you can put your hands down. I'll get back to you guys. You get the same keyboard, but that is a percussion instrument. There are hammers hitting the strings, and this is a wind instrument. So if you go over the piano and you play a note, it eventually the sound goes away. But if I play a note here on the organ, you can't really hear that very well, but guess how long that's going to sound? What? As long as I press it, yeah. So in some ways you can use the same pieces on the piano and the organ, but you can't. A good composer writes differently for the two instruments because they have different properties. And also, too, on the piano, I can't do this. And I can't have different sounds like you just heard. So like the hymn we're about to sing, you can play that on a piano, and it works pretty well. But you can't play this repertoire that I've been playing for you on the piano. Does that answer your question? All right. You had a question?
So I know that to play the organ you have to have like special shoes with like metal bits on the heels. Why do you have to have that to play with your feet?
That's a good question. So these are my organ shoes. I'm wearing them right now. These are suede bottoms. It's a type of leather. And the reason that that's suede is because so I can slide over the pedals easily. Whereas if you use your sneakers, you might mark up the pedals, the rubber's going to catch on the wood. And also, these have an extended heel. These are basically tap shoes without the taps. And they don't have metal. Tap shoes have metal, but these do not. In terms of like actual, I mean, there are metal nails in here, but like none of the surfaces are actually metal. If you're interested in playing this instrument, I would highly recommend getting organ shoes. Some people don't wear them, and that can mess up your feet. Some people don't wear them though. But I've had these for many years, and they've served me well. Does that answer your question? Yeah, you had a question.
So I have a question. You know, like feet have. So does it matter where you hit like the thing at?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, do you take piano lessons? Okay. So, do any of you take piano lessons? Okay. What does your teacher say about how to hit the keys?
She says to bend your arms and like lift them and hit them like with your tip, not flat or not in your hand.
Yeah, that's good advice. Where on the key does she want you to push? Does she want you to push up here, like right near the top?
More in the middle.
More in the middle.
Like past the flat.
Yeah. So in the same way that there's an ideal place to hit a key on a keyboard, it doesn't really matter where on the pedal you push. Eventually you'll get the sound out. But it's best to hit it instead of like on a keyboard, you want to hit towards the front so you get that leverage. The lever is actually the opposite of the key. It actually goes down like this rather than down like that. So it's ideal to play the pedals as far forward as practical, and that way you have more control over it. And you'll see more of that on the last piece I play. You guys have lots of great questions. I hope that we can get to all of them, but it's time, we need to keep going so we can get through all the music. So go ahead and pull out your hymnals and turn to 516. This is Wake, Awake, for Night is Flying. This is a piece by Phillip Nicolai. He was a pastor, and this particular piece was written during a very bad time in his life. A plague swept through the town that he was in, and somewhere between a third and 2/3 of the people in the town died. That's a lot of people that died. So in the midst of this really awful time, he wrote these two particular chorales. Let's worry about this chorale. I won't go down the rabbit hole of all the things he wrote because we'd be here all day. But basically, this is a setting of Jesus' parable of the wise and foolish virgins. And so you get this beautiful text, like at the end of the last verse. No ear has heard the might of thy glory, therefore will we eternally sing hymns of praise and joy to thee. So this Lutheran pastor is proclaiming the good news of the hope that we have in Jesus and in heaven, even in the midst of this really terrible situation. So I want to get this tune in your head. It's a beautiful text and it's a beautiful tune. I want to get this tune in your head so you can go ahead and hear it when I play the next piece, okay? All right, so we'll go ahead and sing all three verses. in the next piece, it's a little bit like the second piece I played. You'll get to hear that tune soloed out. And what I mean by that is you'll get to hear it separated out. Now the thing is with this piece, it's a little tricky. Bach wants to trick you maybe just a little bit. You hear this really fast thing. Where am I? And our ear is drawn to that fast thing, but don't be fooled. The melody is down here. It's a little slower. But you won't let Bach trick you, will you? No, you know the trick. Here we go. we need to go right into our last piece in order to get finished on time. So the next piece is again by Buxtehude. He's the guy that wrote that second piece that I play. And this is the Prelude, Fugue, and Ciacona. And you'll want to be sure and watch my feet for the first part. Are you ready? Last question.
When you were playing with the key, you weren't touching one of the. You weren't touching like this key, but when you were playing, like it went down without your finger touching it. How did? Is that like?
That's a great question. Okay, so the organ has things called couplers, and very briefly, because we need to tie up, is basically I can take what's on, see this key here? I can take what's on this keyboard and put it down there. So, yeah, that's, for some reason,
organs do it even more.
yeah. And it also makes it heavier to play. But thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to play for all of you. And Mrs. Rowland needs to wrap up.
Thank you.